Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of the Product Angle Show. And on today's episode, I have a good friend, Corey Fradin. Hey, Corey, how are you?
Hey, I'm great, Pradeep. Thanks for having me on the show.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you here. I'm super excited to learn about productivity and goal setting. But before we jump ahead, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am the founder of a site called QuickBooost. It's a blog where I write about things or ways that you can do more with your time. So things like productivity, goal setting, time management, all that good stuff. Ways that you can be more intentional with how you use your time each day. I started it a few years ago now, and I've just been kind of writing a ton and just doing as much as I can to kind of get to help, I guess, other people, like I said, do more with their time.
So this is one question that I ask every guest that's been on the show so far. Tell us something about you that we cannot Google.
Gotcha. That's a fun question. It's funny because on my site, like I have a link on my site where I write, or a page on my site where I write down all my current goals. And I have a lot of goals right now. So I have like 10 or 15 goals, something like that. So really in theory, you could really Google a lot of the different aspects of the things I'm working on. One thing that I don't talk about that much is I've actually started a handful of businesses before QuickBooost that you wouldn't really find today because they've all kind of dropped off for one reason or another. And just so it's actually really relevant as, speaking to like product managers of like, not failed, but, maybe missed opportunities, things that didn't go right. So I have a whole slew of apps that didn't really pan out and, e-commerce and different things like that. So a long streak of, missed chances.
Wow. So tell us about one of those apps that you had created and what was the idea or what was it?
Yeah. In college, I created an app where the gist was to help college students better connect with their campus, meaning finding what local clubs were doing, figuring out what local businesses were doing. So you're kind of more tuned into what's going on with the campus. But it was like me and I hired a freelance team of devs, and so they kind of put it all together. But the nature of being freelance, once it was done, the first version was done. It was like done until I had more funds to pay them again. And so anytime there was a bug, it was just chaotic. And I ended up expanding to about 2 or 3 schools, but I couldn't, it was just such a struggle to scale it up any more than that. I just couldn't get it to, but it was a painful but fun learning process. And I'm happy that it's fast.
Absolutely. I bet you learned a lot of skills painful. And a lot of learnings throughout the journey.
Yeah, absolutely. It was an experience. It was a long, painful experience, but I'm happy. Yeah, I'm happy that I did it.
That's good. So tell me, what is a goal and how does one create a goal?
Sure. A goal really is anything that you're working towards in the future. There's some semantics around, the differences between a task and a chore and a goal and whatever. Really, the gist, though, is a goal is something you're working towards in the future. So that can be really anything. The actual process of setting it is really straightforward. There are specific things that I do. There's a structure that I follow. But really, the most basic form is writing it down, saying I'm going to do this thing by this day or at this frequency, and here's why, and here's kind of the steps I'm gonna put in place. It could be that straightforward as that. Especially if you're new to goal setting, I would say keep it as simple as you can.
Why should I create a goal, though? Why do I need a goal?
Yeah, there's all different types of people. Some people benefit more from having goals. Some people don't. I was listening to a podcast a while ago where the guest was Ted Danson. Been on Cheers, and he was on The Good Place, a bunch of stuff. And his journey, from what I can remember, it was very much like kind of go with the flow. Like I don't think he was an aspiring actor. I think he just kind of stumbled into Cheers. Like things just happened. And so that's certainly one way to do things. If you're like the more go with the flow kind of type, you will just kind of, things will just kind of materialize, and that'll be great. If you're the more, I think of like Tim Ferriss, like very methodical, very, determined about what he's going to do. If you're more that camp, then really goals are a really beneficial way to direct your time, to say, okay, I have 2 hours in a day. Here's what I want to do to best utilize it. Meaning if you're, in that camp, if you're very driven and you want to be really deliberate about your time, goals are a great way to kind of put some direction towards what you're doing each day.
That's a very good point, because you're actually working towards a structure towards a particular direction, if you will, as
Mhm.
opposed to just going with the flow and just doing what comes. So I that's a really good point. But how do you create goals that are not too easy, where you can just get them done and you think, or you feel, at the end of the day or at the end of the week, oh my God, I've done all these different goals, but they were clearly too easy. Whereas on the other end of the spectrum, what if you have all these goals that are very difficult and you can't achieve them, and then you start becoming disappointed that you're not achieving your goals? How do you find that, what are your thoughts between creating goals that are too easy versus, very difficult to achieve?
Great question. It's totally a balance. It depends. If a goal is really, what I should say is you can be super flexible with goal setting. I feel like there's a lot of the stigma around it is like, okay, I set a goal and either I achieve it or I don't. And if I do, then I'm a winner. And if I don't, then I'm a loser or a failure. Yeah. That's not what it is at all. I mean, really, the way I see goal setting or goal success is it's about attaining fulfillment. So it's about creating a meaningful life for yourself and using goals as a tool to help you do that, as a means to an end. And so if you're setting a goal that's too easy and it feels too easy, then you can just as easily make it harder. If you want to read, let's say, one book a month and you're reading one book a week, then you can just change the goal. You can say, if you want to push yourself a little bit more, I want to read one book every handful of days. Or if it's too challenging, if reading one book a month is way too much, then you can just say, I'm going to change it to reading one book every 2 months or every quarter. There's so much flexibility that people just don't take advantage of when it comes to goals. And I often say that the first few weeks of working on a goal is kind of like drying cement. Like, you have time to change things before it really needs to get locked in, or before you really feel like it needs to be set in stone in any way. If you start tackling a goal and a few days in it feels way too challenging, like, make it easier, or vice versa. There's no reason that you have to stick with one over the other. You have so much flexibility that you can take advantage of. So change it. If it's too easy or too hard, just change it.
Yeah, create that balance, right?
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of the times too, when you're getting started with goal setting, you may not know what that looks like. A lot of times if you're first getting started with it, or you're just really ambitious, you set really high level goals. You want to just achieve so much, and it can be really disheartening to come up short again and again on that. And I think a lot of it, because I've been there, where you just aim really high. As you kind of get to know yourself and know kind of what is possible, what isn't possible, or what I guess is realistic, as you get to better know kind of how these things play out, then you get a better feel for it, and you start setting goals that are more aligned with the time you have, the actions you actually can place. But until then, just keep adjusting until it feels like a good fit.
That makes sense. I mean, so at the product angle, I have a Google Doc where for every month I have 3 to 5 different goals, where one goal could be publish 4 articles, 1 a week, or it could be try and get an additional 50 subscribers, social media followers, or something along those lines.
Sure.
And then I would have, I need to make some particular updates to the website, or whatever it is. So on a monthly basis, I try to keep between 3 and 5 different goals. To some are growth goals, some are improving the website, optimizing the website, and some are content-based goals. So I'm trying to keep it in that kind of structure. Now, do you have any recommendations that I could use, or to improve, or any feedback on what I've told you?
There are 2 things that actually stood out to me immediately. The first was, so you have that's a lot of goals for one area of your life.
Yeah.
And I know you have a lot going on and you're very good at balancing your time, but let's say the average person isn't as good at balancing everything. That can feel really overwhelming, and they may end up on a given day only maybe working on one of those handful of goals. One thing that I like to do is, when I set a goal for myself, say, okay, how much time do I really have for this area of my life, and how long is this goal going to take?
Okay.
Looking at your blogging goal, so like putting out a certain amount of posts in a month, let's say in a week, let's say you want to publish 1 post a week, and you think let's say you want to publish 1 post a day, and you think it's going to take you 5 hours to do, and you really only have maybe 4.5 hours or maybe 3 hours of actual time to work on that post, and you also have a handful of other goals that you're trying to work on at the same time, you're kind of setting yourself up for failure. So at that point, you need to reprioritize and say, okay, I only have, let's say, 3 hours. It's going to take me 5 hours to do a post. So maybe instead of doing 1 a day, I should actually do it one every other day.
Got it.
And really kind of remove these other goals because they're only going to make me feel really frustrated when I can't make progress on all of them, which isn't against you. It's just you don't have the time for it. So it's kind of prioritizing to figure out what works for the actual time you have. Another thing I noticed too, or one big thing I talk about a lot, is setting goals that are within your control. It's because it's really fun and it's really motivating to set these really ambitious goals that you have no say over. Like, I'm going to make this much by this day. I'm going to have this many new followers by this day. And you could do everything well, but it may not translate into that.
Sure.
So setting a goal like I want to get 50 new followers in a week, it sounds good, but you actually have no control over it. So even if you are tweeting 17 times a day and you're making all these connections and you feel like you're doing everything right, it may not result in those added followers. So what I would recommend doing instead is setting goals that are within your control. And I kind of just touched on it. One thing you could do is, instead of saying I want 50 new followers by the end of the week, saying, okay, I want to tweet 5 times a day, or I want to, start a conversation with someone, 3 times a week, or something like that. Something that's within your control that may end up in that same result, but no matter what, you're going to be able to achieve it, and you're going to feel good about the work you put in, and it's hopefully going to result in what you wanted. But worst case, you're going to, end up being happy with what the work you actually put in.
That makes sense, because for the last 2 months, I would say one of my goals has been to increase the newsletter subscribers. But because I've been doing so many other things, that hasn't been getting the attention that I would like to give it. And that's been deprioritized to one of the lower priorities, if you will. So for the last 2 months, I think I've been putting, increased subscriber count for newsletter as a goal for the next month, because I've not met what I wanted to meet for this current month, just because it's deprioritized. So from my perspective, I don't feel the need to achieve all the goals, but they give me some kind of sense of direction that I'd like to work towards this. Now, when time gets limited, I would drop off the 5th one, for example, increase subscribers, newsletter subscribers, and I'm okay with that. But I get some people may lose motivation. Now, what suggestions or tools would you suggest so that people who are goal setting and they're unable to meet those goals, how do you prevent losing that motivation?
Motivation is super tricky. And it seems like everybody has different triggers or different kind of strings to pull to kind of get that motivation going again. Generally, what I see is when people set goals, it tends to burn off after like 2 to 3 weeks. I mean, you can see it in January when everybody's at the gym and it feels great. And great. Everybody always thinks of the workout one in January, which is so true. Motivation burns off, and you don't necessarily need motivation to achieve your goals. The days that I feel like writing are few and far between, but I know like this is my goal. I'm going to write. I'm going to put out this blog post today, and I have a structure in place. I planned it out, and I'm going to do it whether or not I'm feeling motivated. I'm sitting down and I'm doing it. One thing I recommend is when you actually set your goal, and the way I like to format it is I have like a Google Doc with all my kind of goals on it. And so I'll like write out the goal, and then I will kind of right below it write the reason why I want to achieve it. So why do I want to put out these blog posts this month? Because my site needs more content. The more content I have, hopefully will lead to more traffic. And when I'm feeling unmotivated, I will often revisit that reason why and reread it, and oftentimes that will help.
Okay.
Another thing that people I think neglect to do that's really helpful is actually planning out their days, because again, motivation is going to fade. And you're not always going to be able to rely on it. But if you actually plan out your day thoroughly and say, okay, from 8 to 9, I'm doing this. And then from 9 to 9:30, I'm doing this. And you're really intentional about the actual structure of your day, you kind of don't give yourself the option to not do it. Because you've taken the time, you've kind of thought out how your time blocks out for that day. And you can say, all right, well, I actually don't have time. I mean, so if tomorrow is Tuesday and you're planning out on Monday, you can look and say, all right, I actually don't have time to do these 5 things. I only have time to do 1 or 2 things, and you can be a lot more, you can just kind of stack the deck in your favor and ensure that you actually have time to do the things that are important to you.
That makes sense. And you talk about time, and how can we bring productivity into this conversation? What is productivity, and how do you define that?
Okay, so productivity, time management, they're like cousins. They're very similar. And the way I see time management, we'll start there, is kind of the amount of time you block out for yourself. So if you give yourself an hour to do something, I have 3 hours to do this report. That is managing your time. That is time management. And then productivity is the ability that you have to complete that task within that amount of time. So I think of it as like the effectiveness. The biggest thing that I could recommend for productivity, the biggest thing that has helped me is, well, one, actually, that's related to goal setting, because when I set goals, it gives a direction to my time. Because you can be really productive scrolling through really anything, any of the social medias, or responding to
Time
junk.
sucks.
Yeah, and it can feel really productive. But if you don't actually know what the priority is, what you actually should be working towards, then it's like putting an engine on a boat and then just like going in a circle. It doesn't really make a difference. So knowing what's important to you, knowing what you actually need to be working on, I think is one very important part of that battle. The other part I just touched on, but creating a plan for your day. Not everyone is a planner, but I recommend if you're not one, you should try to be one. I find it very helpful in my ability to get so much done. Do you normally create plans for your day, or how do you normally structure things?
I live by a calendar. So
Okay.
if it's on the calendar and there's a time block, it's going to happen.
Sure.
So I try to block out time to do whatever I want. And then I know in the morning or the night before, I look at the calendar the night before. So I know in the morning if I have any calls or if I'm due to work on whatever subject or, content or whatever. If it's on the calendar, it's going to get done. If it's a something that is just on a piece of paper or something that is a wish list, it may get done. But calendar in it, for me, I live by calendar.
Sure. And I'm very similar. I use Google Docs for everything. So
Yeah.
I use a similar format, but it's very similar for me too. And that's what I recommend others do as well. Like if you don't have some sort of structure that you follow, or you don't have a good plan in place, that is really going to help your productivity significantly. Knowing like, okay, I'm going to wake up and I'm going to do this, and I'm going to work on QuickBoost, for these couple hours, and during QuickBoost, I'm going to do these 3 things. Okay, and then that's done, and then I'm going to have breakfast, and then just having a very you don't have to be super structured. You don't have to be really rigid, but just knowing the things you're going to be working on and when is just the biggest. I think that's the biggest productivity kind of strategy I can even recommend. I find it incredibly helpful to just getting things done.
Oh, absolutely.
I'm sorry, but
go ahead.
As opposed to, I could always say, put in headphones and put on, some like, I don't know, music that helps you focus. I mean, they're like little hacks that you can do, but just planning overall, I think is incredibly helpful.
Oh, I agree. I mean, if I put it on the calendar and I know it doesn't happen or it hasn't finished because something else has taken priority, I know I just have to shift it forward a little bit and put it back on the calendar. I don't get so upset if I don't get it done during that time. I mean, I'd love to, but life happens and things happen. So I'm okay with that. And in a better environment, I may push to get it done, but the environment we're in, I feel like it's okay just to, if it hasn't happened and it's important, it again.
Yeah. And that's actually a big key there, is having a system that you can trust. So if you maybe don't have time to work on something today and it was on your calendar, knowing that if you put it till tomorrow, you're going to get it done sometime in that week. It may not end up being tomorrow because maybe that fire is still burning and you still have to handle it. But you trust your system enough to know that if I move it, it will get done sometime in the next couple of days. Yeah. And I think that's really powerful too. And
if it doesn't get done, is it really important? That's the way I look at it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I always love purging my lists and just saying, you know what, this isn't urgent or important. I'm getting rid of it. And I love that feeling.
Yes. But it's a nice to have.
Unfortunately, I feel like it doesn't happen enough though. Yeah. It always seems to be urgent and important at the same time.
I hear you. I mean, how should I define success? Because we're coming up to the end of the year and I haven't really kept metrics and things like that since the beginning of the year. But last couple of months, I've been more focused on metrics and data and things like that. How should I define success?
Great question. Context matters a lot in this case, I think. For example, business success. I think the common thing is for your business to be successful is, to be making a certain amount so you can be, living off of it, or, paying your employees or whatever. So in that context, I think the income is probably the easiest way to define it. As far as your actual life goes, or as far as my life goes, the way I see it is, and my opinion on it has changed a lot. And I think about this a lot. So it's a really relevant question. The way I view success now is one of is creating a life of fulfillment for myself. So looking across the different categories of who I am and saying, okay, am I living a fulfilled life or am I, am I fulfilled as far as being like a father, as being a husband, as, do I enjoy the work that I do? Do I enjoy the trips that I take? Am I living a meaningful life, or am I just kind of going through the motions, or is one area of my life lacking? So the way I define success currently is, am I fulfilled as a person, wholly across all these different categories of who I am, as opposed to, income or owning a certain amount of things or comparing yourself to your neighbor or whatever. Looking at yourself and saying, okay, am I, living a meaningful life? And that's how I view it.
Fair enough. Can you walk us through a day in your life? From the time you wake up to the time you go to bed. Doesn't have to be, anything specific. I don't want to know about your secrets or anything personal, but just talk us through, how you are intentional with your time and how you consider goals and productivity. Talk me through your system.
Sure. I mean, that's a dangerous question because people I've been asked that question before, and then I end up going in minute detail, okay, at 6 I wake up, and then at 6:05, and then at about 7 o'clock, their eyes start to glaze over. So I'm gonna make it more high level as opposed to really boring nitty-gritty. I think a great place to start is on Sunday. What I do on Sunday is I take a look at all my goals. I have another Google Doc with all my goals listed. I take a look at them. I look at my calendar, and I kind of plan out my week, and I say, what days am I going to work on this stuff? What's the priority? What's the big things I need to be working on? And then from there, I actually plan out my days in detail. So that way, when I wake up, today, for example, I knew exactly what I was going to be doing. I knew when I was going to prepare for this call, when we were going to be talking, the whole deal. I know what I'm going to do after and this afternoon. So just kind of having a structure for my day. My days generally are, at least this year and in the past too, I generally am pretty routined. It's not the most exciting thing in the world being routine, but I find that it gives me the most kind of fulfillment and I guess bang for my buck as far as time is concerned. So my days are very similar where I wake up, around the same time, around 6 o'clock in the morning, I get dressed, drop my daughter off at daycare, and I come back and I do some work on QuickBooost for a little bit. But it's all that boring stuff. Everybody follows the same thing. Maybe I'll exercise later in the day, or not maybe, I will definitely exercise later on in the day. And, that whole thing. I think the big thing is just knowing what I'm going to be doing during those kind of chunks of time. So for QuickBooost this month, I generally set goals for every area of my life. So, and QuickBooost is no different. And so for this month, I'm reaching out to companies, getting them involved with my goal success course, which is coming out soon. Not to do a plug. I brought it.
I have. That's totally okay. We're going to talk about that as well.
Oh, okay, cool.
I have as a question here to ask you about that course.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Again, I'm not trying to plug it. It was relevant to the question. So when it's time to sit down, I know, I'm sitting at my desk. I know exactly where to work, and I know the music I'm going to put on that kind of gets me in the zone. And then I just get to it, and I start reaching out to the people or whatever the tasks are for that day. So the structure follows a very similar format each day, but the tasks maybe that I'll do within each thing, maybe I'll do cardio from 4 to 5, but one day it'll be a hike, and one day it'll be a run, and one day it'll be something else. So that varies, but the structure follows a really similar format every day.
Fair enough. So I like the idea of having that structure and knowing what you're working on and what have you, but how do you tie that in with the strategy or the vision? Because the danger I feel sometimes is that you could do, not you, but like me,
sure.
I could have something on the calendar, but it could be busy work just to put something on the calendar versus doing something that is going to move my needle towards my strategy or vision. How do I link the goals to that strategy or vision? Or how do I, if you want to start off with, how do I create that strategy or vision as question one, and then question two, how to create that link?
I'll tackle it from that perspective. So creating that strategy or vision, I've talked about fulfillment a bunch now, but I mean, that's a great way that I kind of look at life. And so if you were to sit down and write down the various aspects of who you are, so the adventure side of you and the career side and the relationships, what does fulfillment look like in each of these categories? And that way, once you know, you can actually set goals in those directions so you can start working on it. The bigger question of knowing whether something is actually going to move the needle or whether it's busy work, it's hard to know, especially if you're doing something new that you never tried before. If it's a new project, you may get stuck, because you may feel like responding to people over this medium or whatever is really important, but after a month goes by, you're like, oh, that didn't really result in anything. So I think a lot of it is just trial and error and finding the balance of, and asking yourself consistently, like, is this actually resulting in any more value creation, or I'm just like, checking out spam emails over and over again and feeling like I'm doing something with my day. So I guess asking yourself those questions, like, what does fulfillment look like for me? And when I'm actually working towards these areas of fulfillment, am I making progress, or am I just, tying my shoes over and over again and I'm not actually going on that run? Fair
enough. Yeah. Now, let's talk about your course, because I've got access to your course. I'm going to go through it, and I'm pretty excited to go through the entire course. But tell me about your upcoming course and who it's for.
Yeah, well, thank you for even going through it. I really appreciate it. I'm really thrilled about this course. I've been really excited, or I've been into goal setting for a long time, almost a decade now.
Wow.
And yeah, a long time. And so it's really cool to put together this course that I believe in so much. It's my exact process for what I do when it comes to setting goals, but then actually achieving them. Because often I find the setting of the goals fun. It's really exciting, motivating, but like everybody seems to drop off when it comes to the actual achieving part. It goes back to our example of like the gym in January, where like it's really exciting, like everybody wants to lose that weight, but then when it actually comes to following through with it, so many people drop off.
Yeah.
And so over many years of, struggling and trying to figure out how I tick, I've basically come up with a process that I now follow every single time. And that's what this course is. It's a course on not just setting goals or achieving goals, but attaining the overall goal success that you really want, and doing so in a way that adds more, meaning to your life. Yeah, so I'm really excited about it. It's a handful of lectures, and I do a lot of exercises in there, and we kind of go through it together, and it's a lot of fun. I'm thrilled about it.
I am too. I'm looking at one of these topics, and you have in the topic, control is a must. Can you talk us about control is a must? Because that's something that's piqued my interest.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we were kind of talking about it earlier, where it goes back to setting goals that are within your control. We set these goals that are so ambitious. Here's a great one, because we were just talking about it, weight loss. Yes. So saying like, I'm going to lose 5 pounds by the end of the month sounds like a good goal, but you have no control over that. Maybe there's a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different methods of, people saying they lose weight or whatever. And I'm not a dietitian or anything. So, but let's say you decide I'm going to run a mile a day, and that's going to result in me losing 5 pounds. Well, you may run a mile a day, which is 30 miles for the month, a big accomplishment, but you may end up gaining a pound because maybe you're putting on muscle. And so instead of reveling in this amazing accomplishment, 30 miles is a lot of miles. You're instead really annoyed with yourself because you didn't lose the weight. And so you kind of set yourself up for failure by setting this goal outside of your control. You mentioned earlier too, the goal of getting more email subscribers. Like maybe you set a goal, I want 1,000 new subscribers by the end of the month, and you may get to 800, which is awesome. But because you didn't get to 1,000, you're going to be so upset. But you have no control over who signs up and when, and all you have control over is maybe blog posts you put out or these kind of interviews that you do. The things that you can control, those are the goals you should be setting, not these hopeful kind of aspirations that you really have no say over. And so that's why I really stress it a lot when people come and ask me about questions regarding goal setting. Like, you make sure you set ones within your control. Otherwise, you may get there. It may happen, which is great, but over the long run, more often than not, these things are so outside of your control that you just don't have enough say over them. And so you're setting yourself up for failure. So you can avoid the whole mess by just setting ones within your control.
Definitely. That's interesting. So tell us more about the course. What else is in the course? What else can I expect?
Yeah. Well, I should say I gave it away to a lot of people for free beforehand, and I'm really excited. Like, everybody seems to be enjoying it a great deal. And like, as someone that thinks about this a lot and tries to share as much as I know, it's so cool I'm so grateful that people are finding it valuable. And so again, thank you for taking the time to go through it. The way I break down the course is, the first module is kind of the standard boring stuff that I have to touch on, like what are goals and what are the different kinds of goals you can set, the very routine kind of things that you would expect in a course like this. And then after that, we really get into it. So we talk about figuring out what fulfillment looks like for you, avoiding the common pitfalls that you may run into when it comes to setting goals. And then I actually show you how to set goals that you will achieve. So set them in a way that kind of stacks the deck in your favor. From there, I show you how to plan out your days and weeks in great detail. And then after that, I show you what you need to do to actually achieve those goals, to not quit or give up when you lose motivation, or not stumble, and kind of make it a little bit more, I don't know, just favorable to actually achieving those goals that you're after. It's a lot. It's a fun course. There's a lot to it. Like I said, it's my exact process. It's what I do every single time I set a goal. And yeah, I'm super excited for it to be out.
Excellent. I'm excited for you. I have a audience viewer ask a question.
Cool.
Raj asks, what are some of the ways you found to be effective for managing, structuring your day?
Okay, let me think about that. What are some ways you found to be effective for managing, structuring your day? Okay, well, I think one big thing is, planning, which we've talked about. Creating a routine that works for you is always good. Knowing when you are at your most productive and least productive is always very helpful. I know a lot of times if you work for maybe a company, you don't always have control over your days, but sometimes you do have control over when you work on certain projects. So understanding, are you more effective normally in the mornings versus the afternoons? Do you need a nap after lunch? And therefore, like, if you actually try and work on something important, you won't be able to get it done. So setting things up in a way that takes advantage of your most productive times. I, for a long time, thought I was a night owl. So I would, looking years ago back in college, like, I would do all my studying and everything when everyone was asleep. It wasn't until a long time after that I tried waking up early and I found out, oh, I'm actually really productive in the morning and I can't do anything at night. So understanding when you actually get things done, or when you're most effective at getting things done, is super helpful. So if you don't already do that, or if you don't already know when a good time for that is, I would try doing three things, or one thing, I guess, three different ways. Plan to do one important task in the morning, one important task like right after lunch, and one important task in the evening, and see how it gets done. See how effective you are and how easily the actual project comes to you as far as getting it done. And you'll probably figure out one of them is going to be better for you than the other. And one of them is probably going to end up being pretty sloppy. One of them may be okay, but one you're going to be like, wow, I really felt good during this time. So give that a try and see if that helps.
Thank you. I think I'm a 9 to 11 in the morning kind of person. For some reason, I just like that time in the morning, even earlier sometimes. But after lunch, you feel a little tired or full, if you will. And then early afternoon, I think in the evening when it starts to cool down, 9, 10, you're either tired or at least me, I have some energy to do some work.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. See, for me, I wake up early. Like I said, it's 6, and 6 to 10, like, those are my hours. Like, that's where I get a lot of my really, like, if I'm writing posts, like, that's where I write all the posts, is like during the time it comes out. If I do anything after like 5 o'clock, I'm like a zombie. Like, especially now, as soon as the sun's down, like, I can't focus at all. So me trying to do anything at nighttime is just, I've learned, is just not a good use of my time at all. I'm better off just kind of reading or resting or family time, any of that stuff.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
So thanks, Raj, for asking that question. Next question for you, Corey. What have you learned about, as you've run and operated QuickBooost that you wish you knew earlier?
The funny thing about these kind of questions, like, if you could go back and tell yourself in the past, what would you say? The funny thing about those questions, though, is like, if you go back and you tell yourself these questions, then you don't become the person you are.
Yes.
At the same time, when I listen to podcasts and I hear someone answer the way I just did, I'm always like, you're so annoying. Just give us an answer. So if I were to, let's say, go back, not even that, if someone was in my position starting a blog today, what I would recommend is being super patient, because it takes a long time to figure out your voice, to kind of find out what your real takes on things are. SEO, for example, getting traffic takes a really long time to kick in. So just being patient, putting in the work, and knowing that as long as you kind of stay with it day after day, it will ideally kind of, go like this. Well, I guess it's this way, go upwards.
Yes.
Yeah.
And just as a recap, if I'm new to setting goals, what are the main or the things that I should look for when I'm setting goals as someone who's new to it, hasn't set goals in the past, doesn't really know how to do it? What kind of advice would you give them to get them on the path to creating goals and becoming more productive?
Sure. What I'll do like a very simple checklist. So I would say first, sit down, consider the various aspects of who you are and what fulfillment looks like. So like what meaningfulness looks like for you in each of those categories. Then actually set goals that help you do that. So write down what the thing is that you want to work towards. So that could be going for, let's say it's a health related goal. So I want to go for a run this many times a week. I want to run this far this many times a week, things like that. Or let's say it's an education goal. So I want to go through one course a month, things like that. Or I want to run back to running again. I want to run a marathon by the end of 6 months. Write down what you're going to do. Write down the reason why you want to achieve it. Any notes, and then just track your progress as you go. Be incredibly flexible. If you want to read, well, let's do a different example. Let's say you want to start a garden, but let's say you want to start a garden within 2 weeks. And a couple of days in, you're like, this is way too ambitious. Like, tone it down. You can adjust things. Say, I'm going to go buy a plant. I'm going to, water a plant every day for a month. And once I go from there, then I'll, maybe level up on top of it. So be really flexible, set goals within your control, and just, keep changing. And nothing is set in stone. You can adjust all this stuff. And I should say too, if anybody ever has any questions, I love talking about this stuff. So you can always email me if there's ever any like follow-up questions or anything like that.
Yep, there's Corey's website. This has been an awesome chat, Corey. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate it. And it was great talking with you.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.